Welcome to Herp Talk Radio. I'm your host Matthew, and with me,
and I am excuse me, I am Peggy.
Oh, well, Peggy, anything new going on over there?
Oh, just having to separate more little piranha turtles from one another, so that I've got another nipped tail, and and just and today. It was in the 70s here. Finally, I was able to get the turtles outside just for a little while till a nasty storm blew through. But I'm getting positive. Our nights are still dropping down to 40 degrees, and so still can't put them out for 24/7. But that's my turtle news.
It was super nice today. Today was the first day that we felt real sun, I think, in about six months. So it was nice. I got a little burn going on.
Oh my!
Little itty bitty one, but I'm so happy about it. You don't even know.
You got your vitamin D.
Oh yes, and my melatonin. I'm gonna be sleepy tonight.
Oh, nice.
And we're starting like super late anyway, so.
Okay.
Oh.
What about your news?
Well, let's introduce our guest first tonight.
Okay.
Tonight we have Nathan Katz of Katz Reptiles. Usually I give the whole, well, how did you get your start? But we're going to go back to me on my monologue real quick. Because I think you might have more things to say on my monologue. So April, I listened to NPR last night, Morelia Python Radio, and their Burnout episode, which I was already feeling not super motivated when I started that, which that episode helped. Anyway. This last month was just terrible. I have been trying to render a podcast in DaVinci Resolve to upload to YouTube for 8 days now. It has gotten to 65%. I did a couple of things, 75%. I got to 86% as of this morning on my lunch break, and it quit.
Oh.
So whenever that's done, I'll have what should have been our 16th episode, but will now be our 17th episode, out for everybody. And then you gotta throw in the Florida stuff going on, which is why we have Nathan on tonight, a part of it. I also really want to talk about retics, but we'll get there. The situation down in Florida of the FWC going in to a keeper's house, killing one of his pets. The other animals he had registered through the state. He was in communication with the state the whole time. I'm not 100% up on the details, but this is what I'm gathering, just in the short term. Anyway, this has made me debate even doing the podcast, because it makes I like my anonymity. I'm a private person. I like to go to the store and not have anybody know me. That's what I like. Like, I enjoy my private time, if that makes sense to anybody out there. So when I see government overreach coming in and attacking reptiles in general, it doesn't even matter. Just reptiles in general, that makes me want to go back to my anonymity and my privacy and just keep it all hush-hush. I mean, I still gotta sell snakes eventually on Morph Market, but you can still not tell anybody and still sell snakes on Morph Market in some aspects. So
yeah, as long as you're an ethical breeder, but
we'll
get into that too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm sure that situation has impacted other people and made them feel like they don't want to, maybe not even keep reptiles anymore because of the fear involved. I don't know what your feelings were, Nate, and I listened to your podcast on it afterwards, in pieces, mind you, and I don't listen to podcasts in pieces. I sit them down and I do them all at once. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I was a
So, yeah, no, and you guys did a great job with it, but just the emotion involved. If I get involved, I'm going to be completely consumed, and it will not be good. It will be my day job to go through things that I shouldn't even be going through and don't even matter and aren't going to help the situation at all because I'm going to get so deep in it. It's not worth it. So I am going to give this one podcast to the FWC, and the rest of the time we're going to try to continue with evergreen content, stuff that doesn't grow old and stuff that will stick around for time to come.
Fair enough.
So that's my updates for the week. It's been a interesting last month. We're back. We're going to keep being back every week. I've got some plans to do some in-person interviews at the end of the month here. So more on that to come. Anyway, unless anyone has anything to add, Nate,
Yeah.
how do you get started in reptiles, and why retics? Like, those
Yeah.
are two solid questions.
I mean, we had all sorts of animals growing up, mostly dogs, that kind of thing. But I had a box turtle and a couple import iguanas in the early 2000s, late 90s. Those didn't make it very long, and then kind of fell off of it for a while. I was always interested in snakes, but my parents were always on the playing field of, you can have them once you're out of our house. So, I kind of let my obsession with snakes die a little bit, just since I didn't keep any growing up. And then shortly after I was done with trade school, I had a buddy of mine, and he had some ball pythons, ended up getting a Burmese, and I didn't trust his friends to take the ball pythons when he wanted to get rid of them, so I ended up taking them, and that's what sent me down the rabbit hole again.
Ball pythons are what's sending me down the rabbit hole again. So I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I started my research. I think that friend led me to Brian Barczyk. I watched his videos religiously for a long, long time, and I believe he was the first one I ever heard talk about Super Dwarf Reticulated pythons, and that same buddy of mine who got the berm had always talked about wanting to retic, but kind of talked about them in more the old school wild-caught terms. That's what his understanding of them were. You get a retic, they're just going to pee, poo, and bite you. But a little bit of education and some mentors later, and I ended up getting the snake I thought he should never keep.
Yeah. So you had mentioned Super Dwarf. I am the only snakes I've ever been into is what I can catch in my backyard and keep for a week, and then, or even, just handle and immediately let go. And those are garter snakes and lion snakes and some racers. And a really nice big, probably can't even think of it now. It's the ones that you have. The
ones I have.
Yeah, the yellow and black big ones that are here.
The bull snakes?
Yes, geez.
Pituophis are great.
Pituophisae.
I had a 7-foot one that came out of a gopher hole. But you had mentioned the dwarf, super dwarf. How small are super dwarf pythons?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone who's not already aware of what they are, dwarf and super dwarf are simply just a marketing term. They are from islands off the coast of Indonesia where these animals migrated to, and over time, just the smaller genetics won out. So there's several islands where some of the snakes range from about, 9 to 14 feet, I'd say. And then you get some of the smaller stuff where you can get as little as, 5 foot for the males, 6 foot for the males, and then all the way up to, 8, 9 foot, I would say, for some of the smaller localities.
So
See?
that's turning something that's could be a complete giant and completely unmanageable to essentially a carpet python at the super dwarf level.
Yeah, a little heavier bodied, I'd say, but, they're still very lean, very athletic, so not as heavy bodied as like a berm.
They're still super arboreal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the yeah, berms have been, well, retics have been kept like berms too long. Anyway,
Yeah, so here at home, I really only deal with the smaller of the localities, Kalatoa. There's another island, Karampa, that produces similar sized animals. I don't do anything pure here. I'm working with morph crosses, locality crosses. But largest female I have is about 10 foot and I think 6 or 7 years old.
what morphs are you working with?
So I'm heavily invested into the Snow Project. So that's aneuphoristic and albino, just a double recessive project there. Um, let's see, I'm pretty heavy on my tiger stuff. I'm looking to kind of bottleneck that and just kind of stop working with that gene besides what's already in my collection. And then I'm working towards some super phantom stuff, so my all white retic and then cows in the future.
Cows are super cool.
Yeah.
Are you saying cows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
cows. So they start off white and then they get spots as they age, kind of like a dairy cow.
Okay.
They look like a cow.
Oh, okay.
Kinda.
So they're born almost leucistic or albino, and then they become piebald.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, not
Okay.
necessarily piebald because it's more just spotting.
Okay.
Google that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of my passion as far as the morph projects go, and then making sure I'm keeping everything as small as possible, just because I feel like that is probably the best way forward with reticulated pythons. We see legislature coming at them all the time since I've got into retics to now. It's a little scarier now with some of the events that happened just a couple weeks ago, but I think if we want to keep these things in captivity and not have lawmakers come down on us, we have to show that we can responsibly keep these things, and not many people can responsibly keep a 15-foot plus snake. There are people that can do it, and more power to them, but they're few and far between.
I know in speaking with our South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, they're not concerned about the release of species that won't survive our winters, it seems. And I assume that Utah is a lot like that in areas. But it's...
I think it gets way too hot in the summer, too. They'd either cook or freeze out.
Yeah, and so they're not... they're more concerned about the species that are released that could survive and then become invasive, is what they're telling me as we go, through the checklist of what should and should not be our laws. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Utah, I mean, I'm assuming it's pretty similar out there. I don't know if it's as lenient, but Utah's pretty good with their reptile laws. It's same thing. We don't want anything that's going to be invasive into our streams. We have a lot of amphibians that we have prohibited out here. Can't keep anything venomous, but that's most of the country. So
That's true.
Mm-hmm. So
Is there any any? Is there any breeding project you have that you are? Is there one of your favorites? That's, I guess, what I'm trying to pontificate here.
I think the favorite's the one I'm working on currently. I'm working on a potential. Wow, why am I spacing? It's 2 days away from hatching, so I'm excited. But I'm working with a phantom tiger male. He's 62.5% Kalatoa, so good small bloodline. And then he was bred to my purple albino het anery. He's also potentially het albino. His brother proved out het albino, and a very long shot at a hidden anery gene. So potential for phantom snows, but I'd be really happy with just some phantom albino tiger.
That would be super cool.
Yeah.
I am gonna have to get a hold of you after this. Anyway. They're on my list. I've only got two biggish snakes on my list, so.
Yeah.
Super
Is this before or after you move?
both. Well, it doesn't matter. We're talking about eggs right now. We're not even. He doesn't even have them yet.
Okay.
Give me a few more hours.
Yeah, no. I'm sure you could make it happen.
Yeah. I know I can never be a turtle breeder and try to find good good homes for the babies, and even some of these rescues. I'm trying to find a home for a rescue that has a genetic curve to her sternum that we don't want to release into the wild, because I'm working with Game and Fish on these releasing of the rescues. And I'm being picky. It's like, oh, my kids want a turtle. I go, well, are you going to help the kids take care of the turtle? What type of setup do you have? That's how. I could never breed animals to sell them, because I don't trust people's animal keeping. I don't know. And I noticed that you I watched a previous interview that with you, and found that you feel the same way. It's really, you really quiz your potential buyers.
I feel like with the keeping of super large constrictors, you have to be a little more than like if it was a sand boa.
You would think so, but I've heard of people just selling a mainland retic to a 13-year-old at a pet show, or I've been at a pet store in the East Bay Vivarium. It's one of the oldest pet stores in the country. I was there just checking it out on a trip, and I saw a guy hand a berm over to a young girl, and was like, oh yeah, it's not going to get that big, and was just really talking it down. And it's just there's a lot of that happens in our industry, and there's also a lot of animals that I have seen sold and never seen again. A good example is the clutch mates from my purple albino girl that I bred. I don't know where any of the siblings are.
Wow.
Eric Lee may, but they don't get posted up. No one's talking about breeding them. It's a great bloodline, and it's it's just sad that some of those animals may not be around anymore.
Yeah.
So I would love to see my animals, and I've said this on the podcast many times, but 10, 15, 20 years down the road, that's the goal. That's what'll make me happy.
Now, and I like to put a caveat when I am, finding someone who is a good home that will take this rescue. I've given a turtle away, and I said, now contact me if you don't have time for it anymore. You want to, you want to find, it no longer fits your lifestyle. And I never hear from them. And then I hear, oh yeah, I just gave it away. Like, well, why didn't you call me first? Because I don't understand that mentality. It's like, they promise you that they didn't move away. They're still here. Why don't they give, those of us who say, seek me out first before you rehome it. I don't understand why they don't.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a pride thing or if it's just being scared of the judgment, but yeah, would agree that probably happens more often than not.
Hmm. Yeah, it's frustrating.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's why I don't deal with rescues. I get asked all the time because not many people are the snake guy around, especially when you're teaching at a hair school. So you're always hearing about, there's this snake, oh, there's this chameleon, whatever, and I'm just like, that sucks, but I can't take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was listening to Fat Man, and I think he said something along the lines of, you can't save every bearded dragon that you see on Facebook. There's PetSmart and Petco order 25,000 of them a year. Like, you can't save all of those. There's no way. So, like,
Yeah.
do what you can.
I think as a breeder, you kind of have to accept that as well a little bit. You can do your due diligence the most you can, but at the end of the day, once you send that animal off, it's out of your hands.
Yeah. Now, would the pet stores take back the reptiles they sold to resell it? I mean, they're getting something practically for nothing, I would assume. What do the people do that they have to get rid of it no matter what? I just don't know. Do they let it go somewhere? Do they, I think that's a lot of the concern with the game fish and, wildlife officers is so many people, they're less apt to give away a dog or a cat, but yet they still do. What do they do when they need to move and no reptiles allowed in that apartment complex or something? And, and then they can't find a rehome. I think that is, what's really, really hurting the reptile ownership and community is the discarded pets. And, how do we solve that problem? They think the way to solve it is you just outlaw it. That's the easy, simple fix. But, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, especially with Florida, that's what's leading to the problems that we saw a few weeks ago. I mean, Hurricane Andrew back in the day that wiped out a few breeding facilities and let these berms out. I'm sure there were berms released, but it's more just, berms escaping from the hurricane that populated the Everglades. And then just because they're a large constrictor, every other large constrictor gets lumped into that category and laws are made. So Florida, everyone knows, is kind of the standard of what happens in our reptile keeping. So what we see out in Florida can very well trickle down into the rest of the U.S. So I think that's why everyone's so concerned with what's happening out there right now.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I said this in a private message to a listener, but I feel like the reptile, and I've said it to Peggy, but I feel like the reptile community is just the test community. There's another bigger community that they want to go after. But the reptile community is the easy, quick test one to see how we can. That's my thought, but that might be a little far.
Just the pet industry in general, or
I think farming and ranching is a little in trouble as well, along with the pet industry. Well, U.S. ARC fought 25 laws this year that would outlaw rodeo. You can't tell me that they're coming for somebody else. And I think we're just the test market, man. I think we're just that okay, these are the redneck pissed off people, the snake people. When you piss them off, they get all rednecky, kinda, if that makes sense. Some of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I get what you're saying.
Rah, rah. Yeah. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but we do. We get, come take my snakes. You'll see my gun. Yeah, no, that's how it is. So I think it's the test market for other markets that are, come mess with me. You'll get my gun. I think it's the test market because it's the easy one. It's the first easy one.
The exotic animal thing. I know they want to clean up, people owning big cats, the tigers and cougars and all that stuff, which, they don't stay cubs and then they hurt people, and they don't provide a decent habitat for something that big. They've been coming after the exotics, for quite a while.
And I've been made aware that there are very strict laws on owning big cats now. It's not as easy as it used to be. So I believe last year they passed something pretty major.
Yeah, I think you have to be AZA accredited to own a big cat now.
Yeah, you should.
Which is fair. You should have to be displaying the animal in some public fashion, and you should have to be caging it to the AZA standards.
Yeah.
Or at least some. AZA is top of the line, but you could go ZAA or something right below it. Just some sort of standard system.
We had that tiger escape from the big cat sanctuary near Spearfish, and I think it happened twice. They had the extra large cat escape, and it's and I visited there. They did
I used
not
to go there as a kid.
Yeah, and they their habitats were not as, to me, they didn't look as secure as
No, but they weren't a zoo or an accredited
Right.
institution. They were a rescue who got the big cats off of some guy who had them in an apartment building in New York, and that's how they got them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then should that person have to be AZA accredited? That's like they're trying to help an animal out.
Well, yeah.
So it's laws are hard,
You
man.
almost
Laws
wish
are
that
hard.
some of this stuff could be taken by a case-by-case
Yeah.
basis. There's definitely, like I said, not everyone's meant to own a retic. Definitely not everyone's meant to own a big cat, but I'm sure there's people out there that are passionate enough that can make it happen.
Right.
Right.
Well, and then the game and fish got really upset that 3-foot koi were showing up in Stockade Lake, and it's like, what do we do? It's like they couldn't find a home for a 3-foot goldfish, and so they just dump it in a nearby lake, and it's it affects. I mean, so that type of behavior affects, the responsible people. Like I've kept turtles for nearly my whole life, and I don't turn them loose without contacting Game and Fish and saying, I rescued this. It's a native species. What vet can I use to health check it so I can re-release it? They caught it, a year ago at so and so lake. And so, I mean, that's how you release things. You get a health check and from a certified reptile vet, and that's what I'm going through now with about to release 9 or 10. I gotta count. Western painted turtles that were rescued last year, not from people discarding pets, but from road rescues, slightly injured. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And now, I've got the 9 or 10 ready to release, and I'm working with Game and Fish and which vet's going to health check them before their release. And, it's just, how do we, I think that networks have to be built that, where people can rehome easily animals that they can no longer maintain or keep. And that's where the reptile, and pet industry needs to, you have Pet Finder that you can list reptiles on. But I think people don't even know that. I've been contacted, I want a box turtle. And I said, and I want to adopt one. Do you have a rescue for me? I said, no, I don't. But check with Pet Finder. There are box turtles on Pet Finder that are rescues and possibly in your area, or check Facebook lists on. But there just really needs to be an more aggressive way for people to rehome their pets. I think, and that would solve a lot of the problems that concern, the wildlife game fishing parks in all the states. And that would really behoove the reptile industry.
Yeah, I think the other big threat that we have right now, at least in my eyes, and something we've been talking pretty passionately about, is just ethical keeping and breeding. There's been some big breeders of reticulated pythons, one in particular that some pictures have been circulating around of just his facility and the condition of all the animals. We're talking animals dying and rotting away in cages, some of the worst health issues you've ever seen, just big abscesses, RIs, you name it, it's there. Even, other exotic animals that are suffering. So I think ethical keeping is going to be big going forward, just to make sure that we don't have any more legislature passed. I'm really concerned about if these pictures do make it to the public eye, how far they go.
Mm-hmm.
FWC's Holy Thursday massacre almost looked a little bit light in comparison to some of these pictures that we were seeing. So ethical keeping's huge going forward. If you don't have a passion and completely love that animal, you're just in it for the money and you're just running a mill, it's time for you to get out.
Yeah.
And luckily we have new management at Morph Market, and we have USARK working on it, but Morph Market took this breeder down. He's not allowed to sell on that platform anymore, along with a handful of others. So hopefully that's enough to kind of force people out that shouldn't be in, but we'll see. I really hope that it doesn't get to a point where PETA has to get involved. Because, you were talking earlier about farm animals being next or being on the list. It's all animals. PETA doesn't want us to keep any animals.
It's 100%
They lobby hard.
Yeah, I think South Dakota, when it comes to farm and ranch, we're pretty safe in this state because that is, our biggest industries. I know for the Buffalo Ranch, Wild Idea Bison, the way they keep their bison and regenerate the prairie and then have, better grazing year round because of how they manage the herds, that could be more applied, and more cattle ranchers are moving that way on how to regenerate their grazing lands more and keep the animals non-confined, and then their meat is more filled with omega-3 rather than omega-6 inflammatory compounds, and so it benefits the consumer and it benefits the life of the animal, and they're harvested in the field. And it would benefit the ranchers if they were to direct sell the meat instead of going through, like the say of Tyson Foods, which then the ranchers hardly get anything and Tyson Food makes all the profits. So South Dakota and and the like, we could redo agriculture so that the ranchers make more and the consumers are more healthy. And I think a lot of that sort of, how do we improve the industry when it comes to animal husbandry so that it's beneficial for all involved, the animals, the breeders, the consumers. And when you look at it, and it seems like USARK is that's how they're working, to benefit the whole, the animals, the environment, the keepers, the breeders. They see the whole picture is what I'm trying to get at. And
they do, but I think one of my issues, I don't really take issue with USARK, but one of my issues with how it's run is, we're working on legislature all the time, and we need to really be aggressively working within the industry as well. Keepers and breeders, it's just to the point now where we're starting to see USARK thinking about helping police the industry. This is the first example I've ever seen of them trying to get involved and, do right by the animals. So I think we need to see more of that in the future. We need some sort of self-policing in this industry to keep going. So I hope USARK is there for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
we're still a super young industry too, so we're not quite as developed as others. So I think that kind of plays a role in, well, all of it. Like how far back we are. Yeah,
Mhm.
all of it. Okay. From here on out, this is a family-friendly podcast, but from here on out, it might not be. I'm just going to give you that. Okay? So we're going to get into some serious topics. We're going to discuss some serious things. And if you have your kids listening and you don't want them to hear about these serious things, now would be the time to turn off. Other than that, let's just have our normal show. All right.
Say what?
I just want to, I don't know. I put family friendly in the Instagram and we don't really cuss here. So I don't
I'm a
know.
teacher, so I can handle that. I'll get passionate, but I won't get
Yeah.
too crazy.
Well, the last live we did, we had Scott Borden on, and that, well,
I watched
Scott
some of it,
Borden's
so.
not super family friendly in
Nice
his
guy,
language. He's
but just-
he's awesome. I like him.
Yeah.
Just
He's very affirmative.
oh, so let's talk about this. You want to give us a rundown, Nate? You're more. I'd love to talk on it, but when I research it, I just see red. So I
Yeah.
can't.
I'm probably gonna misspeak a little bit. I'll try to be as accurate as possible, but I think the best resource for researching this would either be through New England Reptiles videos or Intrepid Exotics put out a lot. I think it was like 4 or 5 different parts talking about the ins and outs of what happened with Chris Coffey and Bill McAdams and their facility. Timeline, that's where I'm going to get a little foggy. Back when the reticulated pythons and Burmese pythons were taken from a conditional species animal to a prohibited species animal was when Chris Coffey was first faced with having to liquidate his animals. So he liquidated, from what I understand, 100 or 2 of his berms, retics, any of the constrictors that were under the prohibited species. He was able to get rid of all but the 35, or 34, I guess, that are in that video. And when he realized that his time was up, he called FWC to try to get guidance on what he was supposed to do with these animals because they had visited him already and made him sign those animals over to FWC, but still maintain care and maintain health of the animals until they were able to figure out the situation. When he called for guidance, and I also believe there was a retic caught either that week or that day, 15 miles from his house. That was a big news story. They decided to visit Chris. He called to try to get more time and to see what he was supposed to be doing with these animals. They showed up with the intent of either issuing citations or I don't even know if they were citations. They might have just been felonies. I think they were felonies.
I think they were talking about jail.
Oh,
not
my.
just not
Yeah,
just
I think it was 2 counts per snake. And if you've seen the body cam footage that New England Reptile has released, you can see when Chris is confronted with these situations, and it happened the first time he was visited. That's why he signed over the animals. He was scared of jail time. He didn't want to be a criminal.
Ooh, my.
None of us want to be a criminal.
Yeah.
We want a clean record. We want to be doing right by the animals, and we want to be doing right by the laws for the most part. I've only seen a handful of people that just have blatant disregard for reptile laws and stuff like that. So they gave him the option of you take these felonies or we euthanize these animals. And from my understanding, they wanted to euthanize the animals out in the parking lot. And Chris did not want that to happen. Didn't think anyone else should be subjected to the act that they were going to perform. And then they asked Chris to help pull out the animals and assist in euthanasia because they did not feel comfortable with large snakes or snakes in general. So in the video, you see them right after Chris decides, I believe he helped with the first one and just couldn't take it. And so for records and just because something fell off to him, he set up a camera. They knew the camera was there. They allowed him to set up the camera, and he filmed as they went through his collection and took, I don't know what they call it, but the bang stick, the bolt gun, whatever you want to call it, but they euthanized the animals very inhumanely.
On only one step of their own two-step process.
I have a problem with that. So yeah, it's a two-step process, right? And even the second step doesn't make it any more.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's still an awful way to euthanize a captive animal. If you're going to euthanize a captive animal, you should be able to, give it some actual, sedation before you end its life.
Right.
And I would prefer, if I had to euthanize any of my snakes, that a bolt gun wasn't taken to its head. Yes, the second step, they were supposed to scramble the brain in some form with, they suggest a screwdriver on their website. And because they didn't do that, you see snakes writhing around in pain in the background in the video, and they're just discarded in the back, just tossed aside. In the video and in the body cam, you can hear Chris telling them about the boa constrictor in question. They are very aware of what cage it's in. It has a big red tag on it. And I don't know why it doesn't get brought up more. Donnie from New England Reptile, in the first video, when they're about to take that boa constrictor out, you can see the first officer who was looking at that cage kind of peer at the label. All it would take is simple reading comprehension to see that that was a boa constrictor, minus the previous warnings that Chris had given him. The boa constrictor, as many know, was gravid and had a bunch of babies, anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 worth of babies
Jeez.
in there. And in the video, you see them immediately acknowledge their mistake, and they, panic. Yeah.
I
No.
don't know if panic is quite... It's a light panic.
So they weren't. I didn't know No, that was his pet, or it wasn't even on the list, or
So
what?
those are completely legal, 100% legal to keep in Florida.
And he wasn't there to say and tell them this.
He was
or-
telling them.
around the corner because he could not handle what they are doing to his animals. He couldn't, and I couldn't either.
Yeah,
I
wouldn't be
don't
able to.
know how he even dealt with the noise. Chris is going to need so much more help than just beyond legal help here.
So he didn't even know they were grabbing the boa out.
No, they grab the boa out, they execute it, they continue to kill animals. I don't know how many animals before they decide to own up to their mistake. They go around the corner, and you can hear the cops kind of discussing who's going to break the news to Chris, and they're like, listen, you just got to tell him straight up. And they do, and Chris reacts better than I would have reacted. I just said, I warned you 10 times about that animal. That's a boa constrictor that's completely legal to keep in here, and you just killed $100,000 worth of babies.
Wow.
And then they just keep saying it's a mistake, and they ask if there's anything they can do to save the babies. They're asking if they could cut out the babies. And it's like, no, there's no saving the babies at this point. and it wasn't his snake. That was Bill McAdams' snake. So that's his business partner.
Wow.
So Chris freaked out, stormed out, said some expletives, and threw some stuff around, and walked out of the building. And that's huge. I don't know that I could have composed myself that way. And then he ended up making a call to Bill McAdams, who wasn't on scene at the time, and had him come over to deal with the situation.
Jeez. Yeah, I haven't been able to watch it at all. I just couldn't.
I've stomached a bit. I haven't gotten to the body cam footage. I haven't watched the full video. I don't care to.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks
here's
to watch,
here's
but
the
I do think it's
two.
important to be educated and be aware of what the events were that day. So I know it's hard to watch, and these pictures that I was telling you about earlier from the other facility, they almost shadow what happened in Florida with how bad they are. But it's just, if there's these kind of situations happening within our industry, we really need to be informed.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
if we didn't have this video, if he didn't share it, and if it didn't get the traction it got, we wouldn't be.
It'd still be
we wouldn't
happening,
have
and no
the
one would
ammunition
know.
that we have to be able to fight some of these laws that are coming up in Florida and coming up around the country.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
you mentioned it twice,
Mhm.
and that is they were too scared to handle the snakes,
Mhm.
and then all of the snakes had cards in their thing. I'm pretty sure in that whole facility, and
They're
you
locked. They're microchipped.
Yes,
He had
yeah.
to microchip them per the state after
so
the conditional species permit thing went through.
So this isn't a snake issue here. This is the people enforcing the laws not having any freaking clue what they're doing or what they're identifying or what even is a retic versus a boa, because a 20-foot long snake and a 10-foot long snake are two totally different things. A retic is an arboreal skinny snake, and a boa is a big fat arboreal snake. They have two totally different body shapes.
Head shape is
Yeah, they're
1000%
you should
different.
be
It's
able to
crazy.
tell these two snakes apart no matter the paint job on them. They are completely different. One's a boa, one's a python. Like,
not only that.
You can't tell.
There was no due process at all.
It-
There was no chance for him to fight a case. He was given two options, two awful options, and had to pick.
Jeez.
yeah, that's it. That's but the issue is the education issue in the law enforcement. You shouldn't be enforcing laws you don't know or understand or have the capacity to know. And if you cannot identify a snake, and you're supposed to be killing only X species, and you can't identify X species, then you should not be in that position. Period. You shouldn't be put in that position.
Yeah. So was that the only boa that was there?
Sorry.
No, there were other boas in the facility. That was just, I believe, one of the only boas in that portion of that room. Yeah, I don't know for sure on that, but I would imagine with Bill having that animal for 10 years, there were other boas in the facility.
And they killed those two?
No, they just
Oh.
killed the one pet boa, and then they realized what they did. I'm not totally convinced that they didn't have an idea of what was going on before they took that animal out, just with how the officer looked at the tag
The way
before
they
even
looked at it.
opening the cage.
Yeah.
That was my issue, was the way they looked at it, and then it was like, bang, oh, whoopsies.
Well,
That's
that and
kind of how
the-
it seemed.
The third officer on the scene was the one tasked with killing the snakes and had never done that before.
Yeah.
So his training was on the spot
Mm.
with
Yeah.
someone's pets.
Yeah. Well, Game and Fish, I think there's one officer that they got rid of that was basically out of control. And
Are you talking about FWC?
no, this was
South Dakota Game and Fish.
Okay.
Yeah, South Dakota Game and Fish, and they fired him. He was going, uh, you know, going after people for protecting themselves and livestock from wildlife, which they were completely in law to do, and he wanted them to be, you charge them with massive fines and poaching, and he goes, like stopping a cougar from killing your animal, or killing a buck that was spearing you with its antlers. I mean, it was just like, what is wrong with these guys? It's like we're supposed to protect and enjoy the wildlife, but if the wildlife attacks, you have every right to protect yourself and your animals. And this guy, like, no, he killed it, and he didn't have a license to kill it, and it wasn't the season. He had to go to the hospital because the antlers had speared his gut. I mean, it's like, yeah. And so I don't know if they would have fired that guy had it not been for the huge public outcry. A lot of them goes, no, he's a bad seed. We got to get rid of him. But it's just unbelievable.
Unfortunately, Florida FWC is more about paving Florida and about the money that development brings in.
That's a great point to bring up.
And
almost everyone in the higher ups of FWC has some connection to real estate and development.
Oh my!
Which, if you're in a conservation status, or like you're in a conservation seat, you shouldn't be in development, especially in somewhere like Florida. You are currently paving over the areas where these animals live.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
So what kind of conservation is that when you're directly contributing to what's killing the natural wildlife?
Yeah. And that's my beef, as an artist, and Joel being an artist too, and we're both in galleries and stuff, and a lot of artists pay a lot of money to come and see a record animal, and all the hospital stays and their camera equipment they buy, but yet they'll like, oh, we have this world record animal here. let's auction it off so one person can go out there and shoot it, and then the animal's gone, rather than allow it to stay there and have photographers from all over the world increase our tourism to come in and photograph that animal in its majesty. It's
Croczilla down in Florida would be a good example of that.
We had a world record bighorn sheep that was unbelievable, and I'm going to paint him live, because we can't photograph him anymore. But it's like, they only have this mindset that they don't consider the whole picture. It's like, there are surplus animals that need to be killed and harvested so they don't destroy their habitat. But why don't you save the world records, not for just one hunter to hang on his wall, but for hundreds of photographers to come and say, you can, this is the type of animal to come and see in South Dakota and enjoy your hiking and camping and, and fishing here, but yeah, I mean, it's just maddening. It's like, so you're taking the best and biggest out of the gene pool. As a biologist, I'm like, well, that's stupid. I mean, obviously this animal has withstood a lot of the diseases which have killed the bighorn sheep, and it can pass on its genes of that resistance, but let's kill it instead of, the smaller rams and bucks, and bulls, for meat and to keep the habitat in its most healthy. Yeah, I mean, that's my big beef as a geneticist. I just like, no, let's not take out the biggest, so somebody can hang it on the wall. Let's take out,
Smitty talks about that all the time on his podcasts. You'll find like a big, huge rattlesnake or something, or see one dead, and he'll be like, why That thing had survived for like 20 years out there to get that size. Why?
Yes, yes. Well, what's really maddening, Joel and I have saved animals off the road. Just see these tourists pull away, and here's this rattlesnake in the road. So we're going to, like, oh, good, they didn't run over it. So as we're moving it, we realize, oh, they cut off the rattles and let this snake go after they cut the rattles off for their souvenir. And it's like, did you get their license plate? It's, ugh.
I was at the gym the other day, and someone noticed I have a portrait of one of my retics on the back of my arm, and he asked me about it, and told me that he wasn't into snakes, and then proceeded to tell me about a story where he ran over a rattlesnake and decided to try to go pick it up, and it was still alive and bit him on the thumb.
Ooh.
$100,000 worth of antivenom later, and he's still around, but I think learned his lesson, hopefully.
Yeah. We use poles to move them off the road. It's like,
I mean, snake people and people that are educated should be moving these things if necessary.
Yeah.
Not no one. That's how people get bit by rattlesnakes. It's
yeah,
It's men or people that are drunk trying to pick them up.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know how those tourists or whoever they were that mutilated the snake and let it go, what they had used to do that. And maybe they wanted a rattler for a cowboy hat they just bought,
We still have rattlesnake roundups that happen.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately not all wildlife is respected.
Yeah. And so I mean, I used to work for Game and Fish, but in the interpretive park setting, not as a wildlife officer, a law enforcement wildlife officer, I guess you call them. But I did turn in elk poacher, and you just come when you're out in the wilds like Joel and I are a lot, you come across a bunch of stuff. And there's a new organization that says we will pay you to turn in poachers, and you will make more money than the poacher. And this guy that I turned in had 2 sets of elk antlers in velvet, right before they start to shed. So he's got the maximum rack on, and they were huge bulls he must have killed. And so I took down his light, I saw the truck go by, took down the license plate. These huge elk, antlers in velvet were there, and they caught him, and they put him in jail, and they fined him, and and now they've got like they reward poachers more handsomely now. And so it's it's maddening. One of my friends, had said, this preacher goes, I like being a preacher, except I just don't like having to put up with the people. It's like, what? And I go, well, you try. Okay. And I said, well, you try being a wildlife biologist out there, and you really get upset with a lot of people.
Oh, so yeah, upset with a lot of people. I am.
Yeah.
Other than I think I've only seen their one statement. Has there been anything else? I literally did not get on Instagram or Facebook for like 2 weeks. I messaged
I'll
Peggy.
check right now, from what I'm aware of,
It's just the one.
It's just the one, and they really don't add much substance at all.
No, I had none.
Yeah, so I do want to touch on that a little bit, just because they say they're investigating the situation, and that they are inundated with comments on their Facebook or on all their social media, and I also know that they've been deleting comments to try to get
100%.
ahead of this. So one thing that they did that kind of upset me and a lot of people was they tried to kind of smooth the situation over by saying, oh, hey, also, while we're looking into this, we want to let you know that we arrested one of our officers. One of our officers had some child pornography found on his computer, and he's no longer part. So here's their statement. We would like to take a moment over social media to address the numerous comments we've received regarding 2 incidents which occurred recently involving our agency. Last week, FWC officers and investigators euthanized a boa constrictor while complying with a captive wildlife facility owner's request to euthanize relinquish invasive and unpermitted prohibited pythons at his facility. So, mistake number 1. He did not request for them to come out and euthanize his animals. They showed up and gave him 2 options, jail time or have all those animals euthanized in front of him, and they wanted him to help with the euthanization. So, they're already misleading there. This mistake is being taken seriously, and we are examining our procedures to ensure similar events like this don't happen again. And then they released a full statement. I'm not going to go over that, just what they posted on social media. Not much of substance to the full statement. You're getting more of the same. This week, one of our officers was arrested. The officer resigned prior to termination by the FWC. We find these charges reprehensible and will continue to fully support and cooperate with the investigation. So, another bit of misdirection, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then their last statement is, our staff remains dedicated to the conservation of Florida's natural resources, which is the biggest lie that they put in that statement. We've already talked about their special interests and how they don't align with conservation at all, but the officer that was arrested for the child pornography had nothing to do with this incident at all. It was just he was a Ponzi. It was just, here you go. Have
Yeah.
it. But that's not what we're looking for.
No.
We
Not at
want
all.
real change at the state level as far as FWC goes. The people that are running FWC certainly shouldn't have any special interests in development within Florida. They should be solely focused just on conservation, making sure that Florida has some of its natural resources available while
Yeah.
it's sinking.
Yeah.
The,
I mean, why
the-
couldn't they give, why couldn't they give a person in that position an extension? I mean,
He could have
know?
moved the animals. That's the thing.
And
Is
that's
he
what-
had
that's what he
a
was
he
asking
had a whole they had him take care of the animals for almost a whole year, or over a year. It's in that time range, in the year range, where the state owned the animals. He could not sell them. He could not move them. Nothing.
well,
And
that's
he was
stupid.
just in a limbo
Yeah,
after he
had-
already
I
sold most of
believe
it.
it was a 90-day time period. I could be wrong. It was either a 90-day time period or he was 90 days past the time period of when he could have sold the animals.
I think you're right on the 90-day time period to sell the animals.
Yeah.
But
So and we heard from Ellen Bosch, it's like, he trusted his collection to somebody in his move, and it was a horrible situation. He goes, someone he thought he could trust within this, the industry, and they greatly disappointed him. And so I assume this gentleman was faced with the same scenario.
well, it's not someone in the industry though.
Yeah.
It's the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this history, the government really
It's
messed.
not like, hey, Nate, I'm getting out of reptiles. Here's my whole collection.
Yeah, this
I know
wouldn't
you'll
be-
take good care of
Yeah,
it.
this wouldn't be like me sending my snakes out to Lucas going, hey, I know you care for reticulated pythons, so would you watch these for a little bit and can I have them back when they're done? I actually had a buddy who works with reticulated pythons just north of me, up in Wyoming, Idaho, I can't remember which state.
Yeah, man, we're all close. You might be the closest person besides the locals we've had on, which really excites me because I was like, oh yeah, you're like 7:45. I'm like, oh, I don't even have to switch time zones or nothing. Heck yeah!
This is the first Mountain Time podcast I've been on. I'm for it.
Awesome.
But yeah, he had to let someone take some of his animals for a short period of time. He was going to be taking them back eventually, and when he asked for them back, found out that they got sold from under him.
Wow.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, it's a hard situation to trust anyone with your animals, industry or not.
Yeah.
But when the government comes in and says, give us your animals, or we're taking you to jail, that's kind of what you do. And then the government owned them, but he couldn't do anything with them, so they were the government animals in his care. Essentially. The way I'm understanding the situation, which I'm knowledgeable, yeah.
Yeah, so go to prison, which, how are you going to take the animal, or take care of the animals at that point? And, or
Yeah.
euthanize the animals. Like, you're not left with any kind of option, no sort of legal recourse. I mean, there's legal recourse in the fact that they're trying to fight the prohibited species ruling, but you know, he himself had no options that day, or the other day
Absolutely
that
not.
they seized his animals and claimed them as the government's.
Because he did jail time too, didn't he? Before?
I don't know.
I thought they took him. Okay. I thought I heard.
In all the
Mhm.
body cam stuff I've seen, he was very concerned about any charges, didn't want to be labeled a criminal.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm talking before.
Yeah,
Like a
yeah.
year before or something like that. Anyway.
I'm not aware on that front.
Yeah. I thought I heard something, but I don't know.
Yeah.
This is why I called you on. Because I'm not the expert, and
Yeah,
I never
I mean,
want to be.
I mean, it hurts me just as much as anyone else to watch that and to be involved with talking about it. You know, those videos pop up daily
Yes,
on
they
my
do.
on my feed, and if it's new information that's coming out, I'm reading it and everything. But you know, every time you hear the pop of one of those, one of the nail guns going off or whatever they use to execute the bang stick, even the sound is awful. You know, it makes me recoil every single time that I hear it. Yeah, it sucks to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of vets who know how to humanely euthanize animals.
Yeah,
And
there
and
was
if
the
and
vet
if
that
this
did
was
the
a
autopsy on the boa Big Shirl, showed the penetration wound, and you know, they did it on a concrete floor. They were breaking the bang stick in between killing these animals and having to, you know, reset the bang stick, make sure it was working properly again, and then going back, firing it right into the concrete. So
Jeez.
yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's
How long did Florida give to anybody who had retics to, um, you know, to rehouse them or to sell them or, you know, move them out of state? How, you know, for once they passed the law,
I think it was that 90-day
I
window.
think it was the
just 90
3 month
days.
90
3-month period,
days.
and he moved hundreds of animals during that time. He found homes out of state that could take these animals, and give him more time, and given, you know, a little bit more information out to the public about what was going to happen to these animals if they weren't liquidated, these animals would have found homes within a few days.
Yeah.
There was no need for any of these captive animals whatsoever to be euthanized. There was
Yeah.
definite ways around it, definite legal ways around it, but the state just decided not to work with him. It could have been in response to that reticulated python that was captured by a local teenager a few days, or I think it was even the same day, maybe the day before. But the keeper that ended up catching that reticulated python in someone's backyard, she asked that they, find it a good home and, make sure that it's taken care of. And they did the same thing to that snake before they went over to Chris Coffey's facility.
Mm. I don't understand.
We discussed it with Phil Wolf because I think because the tegus are in about the same area, like it was the same bill, right? So we were talking
Tegus
about
iguanas.
so we were talking about the tegus because I remember there being like a place that would go out into the wild, get the tegus, like remove nuisance tegus, go out into the Everglades, collect tegus, and then sell them into the public outside of Florida. And apparently that's done now, which I feel like would be very helpful in conservation in Florida and removal of species, but now you're getting rid of that option too.
And I'm not totally aware within the tegu space about how they affect the natural resources out in Florida. Obviously, the Burmese pythons are incredibly invasive and incredibly destructive to the habitat out there. They've done a lot of damage. So, it's hard to really argue that one. But reticulated pythons, there's not a breeding pair out in the Everglades. So to lump those in and, treat them the same, it's almost the same as misidentifying that boa constrictor. It's not the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and here I had just watched, I was going to try and watch the video we were talking about, and I go, no, I can't do that. And then what came up because of the search engine thing was these cops misidentifying this guy that was just walking, and they showed the perp that they were looking for, the maybe perp they were looking for. And he was caught on a door ring camera. And then they said, well, there's a guy that kind of matches the description. Minutes later, total different clothes than the picture that they had of who they were looking for. The guy that they cuffed right away was blonde. The guy that was on the cam, it was, white dude, but dark hair. And it's like, why would you even approach this guy that's totally wearing the total different clothes, total different color hair? You can tell they're not the same guy. And the guy goes, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? And it's like, what is it about these law enforcement conservation officers and law enforcement in particular? It's like, hello? Do you have eyes?
So this goes into a big. I like that cops are here to protect me. I do not like cops who do not understand the law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's just it. So
Yeah.
and misidentifying and things like that. So it all comes down to an education issue at the end of the day, and a training, which is education.
Yeah.
Education and training. At the end of the day, all the issues that you even see on the audit the cops YouTube stuff and all of that could be fixed. Mm-hmm. And we could be following the laws if everyone was trained properly to follow the laws, mm-hmm. and to know what they're identifying in this case, mm-hmm. with FWC anyway, or be able to track how many gopher tortoises they've killed and paved over. That would be cool to know how many gopher tortoise habitats they've paved over. They don't have that information.
Mm-hmm. Or, they, I think it was the day after, even the day of the Holy Thursday incident, they posted about a Save the Manatee event. They've sprayed all the food for the manatees, so that they don't have anything to graze on anymore.
Yeah.
They have to have these closed-in pens where they're feeding them.
Mm-hmm.
and that's not conserving our wild manatees at all. And
Well,
that
and
doesn't
then
even take into consideration all the boats and stuff that are chopping these things up in the waters. I mean,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much more work that needs to be done, and
Yeah. Saying it lightly.
well, and just it's structured so badly. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
talk about any kind of law enforcement. There's definitely good eggs and bad eggs, but any kind of position of power, you're gonna see people abusing that power, and I
Right.
think that's a little bit of what we saw that day for sure.
Right. And
Well,
and the thing that I know that when I boil all the pine needles that have fallen off my trees in my yard, and then I spray them where most people spray Roundup, it kills every plant there. The terpenoids in the pine, it kills the grass, it kills the weeds. So I don't have to spray Roundup. These that'll give me and my pets cancer. And then the terpenoids degrade; they're biodegradable, and then you have to reapply. It's like, well, why? I don't like having to boil all this pine to get this Super Nathan to spray on there. I would just assume that Dow Chemical sells this natural pine spray, rather than the Roundup. And it's like a lot of us don't want to put a crab boiling pot on the stove to boil this stuff down. Why can't you do it for us and sell us that, rather than, yeah, it's maddening. It's, they
the-
can't copyright the pine, yeah,
There's no money in keeping us healthy.
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Because how could you sell big pharma?
yeah. They're all in
Uh,
cahoots. Yeah, let's start with the
so,
whole thing.
so the other issue with FWC then is like a normal law enforcement officer, like a county guy. I don't know if you have state police there, but we don't. We have county guys. Like a county guy has people to answer to, like a local, DA, district attorney. They have to answer to. They have people that they have to make happy, and FWC has to make Ron DeSantis happy, and that's it, because that's who they answer to. They do not answer to anyone else except for the governor, as far as I'm aware.
Well, that's kind of the
Like,
way it is
they don't.
in
Am
our
I right?
state too.
Am I right, Nathan? That's
As far as I'm aware, and
that's
from all of the outreach to Mr. DeSantis, I have yet to hear of anyone who's had any response.
no.
Yeah,
No
with our
automated,
game,
no automated emails, nothing. I know I haven't received a response. I've sent 5 or 6 emails at this point. Probably should have sent more, but I'm
We
not
can
getting
call.
anything back.
I thought about it.
When
I
I called, I couldn't get through. They were like, it was so inundated.
They're just not answering. Oh, screw this. I'm done.
Yeah, there's no place to leave a voicemail.
That's
It's bad.
oh man.
and see, our game and fish all replies to Pier, our capital,
Oh.
but we have county sheriffs who deal with other laws, but our game and fish laws are all state operated. We'll have different regional offices of game and fish, but all the action is it's not coming out of the regional office. It's all just discussed in Pier on what
Right.
to do to on violations of game laws. So
Right.
yeah.
But where that's all set up is like Governor DeSantis is in bed with the paving companies and in bed with the and that's what it truly boils down to, and that's who these people who went in and killed this dude's pets. At the end of the day, all 36, 35, 36, all of them were pets.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. They're all captive, bred and born. They were all
Locked cages.
They were
had to
all locked
unlock
cages.
Every single cage in that video.
I don't think
Microchipped.
I didn't watch the whole video, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't a normal looking one in there.
Well, and
right?
if it had
They
anything
were
to
all.
do with the escaped reticulated python, they could have easily identified by trying to scan for a microchip
Yeah.
or searching for that animal in his facility, which it wasn't his animal. It was 15 miles away. I'm sorry, but
That's a
that
long
animal's not going to
distance.
make it 15 miles to get into that backyard.
No.
A large constrictor? No way. It's getting run over. It's getting eaten by something. You know, there's no way that that animal's making it 15 miles down into a suburban area.
It's
No,
maddening.
Mm-hmm.
it is. It is.
Mhm.
So, support U.S. ARC.
Yes.
That's
Support US ARC. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
something I haven't.
between this and the pictures that we received from that awful breeder. It just feels like I'm not getting a break, and it's awful. It just feels like one terrible situation after another. But I'm hoping that soon there's some kind of light at the end of the tunnel as far as recourse for both FWC and this breeder.
That's where a. See, I was into reptiles before the Lacey Act thing, and then the Lacey Act thing hit. So this is different. This is way different, but it's still the same fight. It's just escalated now. That's it. It's still the same fight as the Lacey Act fight was 10, 12 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just called a different thing there.
Yeah.
I mean, the whitelist is maybe the most destructive thing we've seen in terms of animal keeping ever.
What is the whitelist?
So FWC, instead of a prohibited species list, is trying to move to a whitelist of animals that they deem proper for captive animals.
Are cats
So-
on there?
Who knows? You know, it's a very real possibility that cats don't end up on there. The dogs don't end up on there. You know, it's just
I mean,
they at that point can decide what you keep.
Or what particular breeds of dog you can keep?
Absolutely, yeah.
well, and
Yeah.
this is where U.S. ARC is. Their lawsuit is fighting just the fact that FWC could even make laws like this because they're supposed to be in conservation, not in captive management, right?
I would imagine so.
that's-
I don't see any reason for conservation to be dealing with my captive animals.
Yeah.
If
That's
the
what-
state wants to start talking about what captive animals you can or keep, then that's a different subject all in its own. But I don't think that really falls under conservation.
No. And that's the scope of FWC at
Sure,
the
it
end
does-
of their
it
at
does
the
when
end
you're
of their
talking
last
about invasive
Facebook.
species. Yeah,
Right.
that's definitely a conservation issue. But
Yeah.
I mean, you should be sticking with what's affecting your state and not trying to dictate what happens around the country.
Right. I mean, you know, with all of his animals being chipped, if they were worried that they'd get out and become an invasive species, well, if anybody knows that their animal's chipped and it escapes, you know, they know there could be fines or whatever. You know, I know that's, you know, what they're setting up in some states is that all species that are being sold that could become invasive in this environment must be chipped and you know whatever because some of the zoos have to do this when they're taking on animals from confiscations that you know that they microchip and mark and such and you know from what I've heard from turtle keepers that have taken on a lot of these fish and wildlife illegal confiscations. Yeah, I mean, this comes right back to how do we avoid this all comes about because of the invasive species issue.
But yeah, right, the berms, which are a totally different species, and I feel like we've been keeping retics in captivity long enough to where if they were gonna be invasive in Florida like the berms in 1992, mind you, this is before I was born. So you would think we'd have the problem of the retics already if the retics could be a problem.
Oh, we absolutely would.
Yeah, that's like we have problems with iguanas. Those were in the 50s. Like we have we would already have the issue. So this species, no matter how big it gets, no matter whatever, it's not invasive in Florida at this moment, and I think it would be heavily invasive if it could be.
I'm surprised they're not invasive, just because they come from the same environment. You know, they thrive in the same kind of environment, but for whatever reason, they don't thrive in the Everglades. I'm sure that there's been retics either escaped into the Everglades or released, or, you know, part of Hurricane Andrew back in the 90s. But the fact is, we're not seeing wild populations of them.
Have biologists said why? Have they studied that at all?
That's something I'd have to do some research into.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard about the potential breeding pair of, I believe it's a Cuban croc pair that might be out in Florida right now.
No.
Shoot on site order for them.
Wow. How did they say they got there?
I don't know if they were just released, if they were just someone's animals, and that's my best guess. If we're talking about Cuban crocs,
I don't
someone
know.
brought them in, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first
That,
I've heard of it.
Person
But
was.
I know it's been, one of them's been spotted, but I don't believe that they've captured or killed those animals.
So, do they have a bounty on people bringing in invasive species, like, you know, the green iguana and the, you know, and the snakes? I mean, do they offer a bounty for people to catch them in the wild?
I'm not sure.
I think the berms have.
I know berms have a bounty. I know they were allowing people to kill the iguanas, but I don't know that there was a bounty.
Mm-hmm.
The iguanas you're never going to get rid of. That's too big of a problem at this point.
Well, and same with the berms. If they've been here since the 90s, we've had all these, you know, big hunts for them, and, you know, financial incentives to kill and bring them to the University of Florida. You know, we would see some kind of dent.
Yeah.
There's no dent. The population's growing rapidly. You know, they have huge clutches. There's no way that you're going to eradicate these animals. It's impossible. They're there to stay.
You know, it just seemed, you know, that it's worth to keep a bounty up on them and feed them to the homeless. I mean, you know, if we've come across a snapper on the road that we couldn't save, so we euthanized it and ate it, you know, because we had a fishing license, and so you can catch 4 snappers. What was that? 4 snappers a day, is it?
Wow.
You know, and I don't go out to catch snappers to eat, but, you know, I'm not gonna have its death go to waste. You know?
Is that something you just go down to Walmart and get a permit for?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just your normal fishing license
Yeah,
for like
fishing
$20
license.
or
Oh, wow.
whatever.
It's yeah, I think it's 30 now or whatever. I get one every year because, you know, I'm
minimal.
constantly moving rescued turtles beyond the possession of 4 limit. You know, it's especially if I, you know, found a drying pond and I'm getting all the animals out of what now is a puddle, and I'm moving them to a more permanent pond. I have a scientific collector's permit for that. But it's but then I also just buy the fishing license and habitat license or habitat sticker too. But in case I come across especially, you know, a painted turtle, I just, you know, leave it, euthanize it and leave it for the predators away from the road. And then the snappers, though, that's enough meat to have a few stir fries out of, you know? And it does not taste like chicken. And we've done that with large snakes too. You know, even and.
See,
But
I think the whole Florida thing would bug me less, even if, and I hate to say this because it's gonna piss somebody off, because it's gonna piss everybody off, because it would make me mad too. Even if those snakes were going for someone's boots, right? if they were gonna, they had to euthanize them, like that's the law, whatever. But then they were gonna like send them to a bootmaking company, so at least like they could do something instead of just be done completely. I don't know, and I hate the boot thing because that's terrible. I guess I got trolled on Facebook, so I'm gonna use that because I laughed so hard. I'm like, I don't really care, dude. But you know, like something like, yeah, it's just I don't know, and maybe it's
Well, I
a
mean,
terrible situation. It shouldn't have happened. Period. That's it.
Yeah.
That's really the end of it.
Yeah, when it comes to some, animals that they've raised, it's one thing to eat a snapper. I've just found,
Most of them
you
were
know,
captive born too.
I know,
Like that, and most of them are high-end morphs that would never survive in the wild.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing. The white, like a big white snake, isn't gonna fare well. And even if you two of those bright white snakes got out, they're probably gonna make bright white babies. So, guess what? It's gonna be a non-issue at
Well,
the end of the day.
it sounds to me that the Game and Fish was not willing to put extensions to, to
They
help.
made him hold him for a year before they figured it out. Not do an extension. They had a whole year of extension.
Yeah, like why did they take possession of it?
Sorry, I'm a little worked up. This is why I haven't talked about
You're
this.
fine. I mean, how do you know that they would have even shown up if Chris hadn't called them?
Right. If
And
he
tried to
wouldn't
comply with their rules.
Yeah.
if he wouldn't have got his snakes microchipped. Like if he wouldn't have that's where this goes back to the very beginning. Right here on it made me want to quit the podcast. Because at the end of the day, it's not I'm not doing anything illegal. But it's just the fact of people knowing. Because clearly once the wrong people know, it's game over in some cases. And that is completely disheartening for
Well, yeah,
me and this hobby.
because
Completely.
I've had a conversation with a person with Game Fish and Parks, and that I didn't want, I wanted a couple of aquariums, one in one room, one in the other, and fish bore me, so I wanted, to buy some turtles. I didn't want to collect from the wild because I didn't want to deal with parasites. So then I looked up, who could I buy from? So I Googled the person and the owner to find out if there was any, story of this business or the owner getting caught doing something they didn't do. And I didn't find anything. So I go, okay, so I'm buying from a reputable breeder. And hello. And
Oh, that's awesome. I talk mad crap about cats, but that's all I had growing up because that's all my mom would allow me to have. So
Hey, my
I
last
like
name's
them.
Cats, and my parents wouldn't do it. Because
Oh,
I was allergic,
man.
So I had to end the irony at some point.
yeah. So anyway, the Game and Fish person goes, well, I said, these are captive born. I bought them as hatchlings, so I with the egg tooth, and they go, well, how do you know that the parentage was not taken from the wild? And I go, well, he's been, according to what I've read, his facility's been visited by state and federal, authorities looking things over, and he passed. And so I go, well, how much more of a certificate of I'm doing my due diligence on the turtles that I buy, and but it's just like in a previous podcast guest that we had, it's like you never know when you're going to get a person that's out of control and just arbitrarily handcuff you, like this,
right.
this
And
dude
that's
that was out walking, it's like, but
that's what
I did
that's what
every
FWC could have been doing. It could have just
Yeah.
been but they won't say that. They could, the easy way to sweep it under the rug would be to fire those 3 guys, say, oh, they fucked up, we're not going to have it happen again, we're devoted to conservation, and that would be the end of it. And the reptile community would probably, some of us would still be pissed off, but it would fizzle out over time.
A lot faster.
A lot faster than it is, because they're really not making the right moves now.
Yeah.
So
Well, and optics is so important in this industry. I mean, I don't know if either of you have been visited by your local animal control or anything like that, but I had a situation arise just a couple years ago where, I'm just trying to give my animals some enrichment in the yard. Unfortunately, my yard in my rental is street facing, and I had an elderly neighbor who, snakes scared her. I don't blame you for that. You're not used to them. Sure, snakes can scare you. But didn't talk to me or anything. We had a little pool set up in the yard, and I was letting the snakes kind of roam around, swim in the pool, just get a little bit of enrichment outside of their normal environment. And went out of town, came home to animal control, an animal control slip on my door.
Oh my.
Luckily, when I saw the slip, I had one of my buddies' names on it, Don Belknap. He is a garter snake breeder out here in Utah. Brian Cusco's done a little highlight of him on Triple B TV before, but he's the lead animal control officer out here in Salt Lake. I believe he's moved on now, but I don't know if I would have been as lucky if I didn't have
Yeah.
someone who bred, kept, was familiar with snakes. I don't know if I would have gotten the same treatment.
probably
Although
not.
my business was licensed, the state knows I'm breeding reptiles, so I was dotting my I's, crossing my T's, that kind of thing. But when animal control shows up at your house and you're dealing with animals that people view as dangerous or way too exotic for anyone to keep as a pet, you get nervous. I mean,
Yeah.
I was scared to hell that my animals were going to be taken from me, even though I thought I was doing everything correctly.
Well, and that happened to me. A neighbor thought I had done something against him, and it was somebody else, and I had no idea, you know, who, who called the police on this other neighbor, and I was blamed for it. It's like, why are you blaming me for it? And so the neighbor who thought it was me calls. I'm at work, and all of a sudden I get a call from my immediate neighbor who said, animal control's at your place. And I'm like, and I had horses, I had, dogs, and our dog yard is like a quarter of an acre. It's electrified, so the dogs couldn't get out, and dog houses, and it was with buckets of water, and so animal control, and my neighbor goes over there and goes, they're at work, why are you here? Well, we had a call that these animals aren't being housed correctly. And she goes, but I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had this kind of setup for my dogs. That luckily the animal control person saying this. So I get this call and going, yeah, they're here. And I go, why? And so it's like, thank God that this person just didn't take my dogs away from us, and then I had to find out what, so then I called them. We got a call from one of your neighbors, and I'm like, who? Well, we can't share that. And so I'm involved with this turmoil going on that was, doors down from me, and it's like, and
My situation was very similar. I mean, the person that called, they told me the same thing. I can't let you know who it was. I get that. I considered putting out flyers in neighbors' mailboxes, inviting them over to learn about the animals.
Heck yeah.
But, what he did just by parking there and hanging out with me helped a lot. But the report he got was that I had an alligator swing in my pool and that I had snakes loose in the house.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, like who
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
That's well, and then again, if you didn't have the guy who bred garter snakes in your area and you just had local huntermen, classic huntermen, you might have a totally different outcome on that.
You mean
Well, it shows
Gaston?
you that people, if they're nervous about something and don't want you to continue keeping, they'll make up whatever they can to try to paint a different picture of you.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is one thing where you don't want to do the podcast anymore. You know,
Well, no, I want to do
feel
the podcast. I was
I
feeling like I don't want to do the podcast because of what's going
yeah.
on.
Well,
But
I feel like the guy from Legends of the Fall, played by Anthony Hopkins, of like, you know, the screw 'em, you know, kind of thing of just, you know, just wanting to get away from humans completely. And I mean, I live 15 miles out of, you know, of town, but in a small equestrian, you'd call it, home association, where we each have 3 to 4 acres, and we can have a, you know, a couple of horses in the back and this kind of thing. And, you know, and but yet even in the 6 houses that we have and neighbors here, this kind of turmoil showed up. It's like, you've got to be kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how isolated do I have to get away from stupid human things? You know, it's yeah, it's maddening. But, you know, and now that I'm working with Game and Fish, you know, because I decided during COVID, what can I do, you know, rescuing these turtles. So far, you know, the people that I've worked directly with are really gems, you know, I'll say that. And maybe I've got a reputation for speaking out for against those who aren't going to be, you know, because I was one that signed that petition on the guy who was speared by the deer, his right to shoot it. And I wrote a letter to the editor, and you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I was one of the vocal ones that helped get that guy fired, you know. But it's, and I've, you know, turned in an elk poacher, so, you know, maybe I, you know, maybe I have little stars hanging somewhere above my name that
you're on the good wall. At
the good wall.
At the GF. At the GFP.
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
You got
you
your
know,
little picture. It's all framed. They
well,
got little sparkles hanging by it.
and as I've
streamers.
learned in watching Glenn Kirshner, this ex-federal prosecutor, you know, when you show that you had no intention of breaking the law and you've done all this stuff to not break the law goes easier on you. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you made an honest mistake and you had no idea, blah blah blah. And, you know, you just share all that, you know, and then, you know, we don't take you to task.
And,
so I'm like, oh good, well that's how I've been behaving.
and that's where the situation in Florida is so disheartening, right? Because he did do what he was supposed to do, and he still wasn't given any decent option in views of the reptile community, of a conservation biologist in Peggy, because Peggy's not the reptile community. She's her own little branch off there, I think.
Something.
Yeah.
I'm a citizen, retired, you know, person
scientist.
Scientist. You know, I did some, you know, with my biology degrees, I did some game and fish work and Forest Service work, and then I went into laboratory and working for a biochemist in, you know, biochemist, nutrition, you know, that sort of stuff. But it's so my year, the last time I worked for Game and Fish was back in 1980, you know. So yeah, I mean, but, you know, I know a lot of my classmates that I graduated with in wildlife and fisheries, but then I also went on to get, you know, another biology degree. So yeah, I'm kind of an entity.
Well,
but,
do you have any other questions on the FWC stuff, Pegs?
It's my mind is spinning over the whole thing. Oh, what I was going to say is, did he try to contact them in that year, which they took possession but didn't know what to do with them? Who did he try to work with to say, hey, give me possession back, let me find, you know, rehome these? I mean, how proactive was he in bending as many ears as he could to change the situation?
That's a hard one to say. I know for sure that within that year was, I believe, the 90 days where he was allowed to liquidate the animals.
That's the way I understand it too.
Yeah. So, in that time, he already had his animals microchipped. They were aware of the period he had to sell his animals. I'm not sure if he was keeping them updated on what he had sold, or if
See,
he
I'm a
had
real
contacted
community.
them
Yeah.
close to the deadline before the deadline ran out. I'm not sure, but I know that he did contact them after the fact, trying to get an extension.
Yeah, because I'm a real communication nerd. You know, it's just like, okay, this is the status. This is how many animals I've already sold. I just need, an extension. You don't need to take even possession of these. Them still remain in my possession so that I can, liquidate them. And if I'm not getting the right answer from this person, I'm going to go higher up. Who else do I talk to?
Actually, I do know that he did reach out in that time. So the first visit, when he signed over his animals, he was told that he could contact them to try to get more information about the grandfathering rule and to see if he could be grandfathered in. He reached out multiple times and never got a response from anyone. The officer that showed up said that he couldn't do anything about forwarding his message on about grandfathering in. So he tried everything he could do to keep these animals legally.
Yeah. Boy.
Yeah.
So they do have a grandfather rule, but they were ignoring it.
I'm not sure who, if anyone, besides maybe AZA associated zoos are
That's the
getting
way
that.
it seems, Pigs. Yeah. That's the way it seems. There's no evidence against what you're saying.
Wow.
Do you have anything, Nate, left on the FWC situation that I might have left out?
Let me think. No, not really. I really think that it's important for people to go watch the body cam footage. Make sure that you're still contacting the representatives. Make sure you're not letting this situation die out. I appreciate you guys having me on and talking about this tonight, just because it's just adding more fuel to our fire.
No,
we can't go silent about this issue.
Struggled.
Yeah.
Right. I struggled deciding to do something like this, and I did want to have you on. I had you on specifically for the FWC stuff, but
I also want to encourage people to tune in on Friday. We released it for early access today for our Patreon members, but we did an episode just last week about the morph market bans and ethical breeding and keeping practices that I think are going to be very important moving forward, especially with reticulated pythons. So I highly encourage anyone who's has a retic, any kind of large constrictor, to watch that episode. And if you're thinking about getting into these animals and want to do it responsibly, the Retic Lounge is a decent start for people looking for information about how to keep these things safely.
there is some awesome information in your guys' podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate being able to listen to people talk while I'm at work instead of only music. So,
Me too.
So
I
thank
generally
you.
go towards comedy, just because I fill my entire life with reptile stuff, and I try to support everyone's podcast a little bit, but everyone needs a break sometimes.
Yeah, no, I seriously took a solid week and a half, just no podcasts. I listened to yours and the FWC episode that you guys did. And it took me 2 days, which is not normal. It took me one morning, and I stopped, and I came home, and Kelly yelled at me because I was very cranky. And she's like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so cranky?" Yeah. I finished the episode, same thing the next day. Like, I leave fine in the morning, but, oh, no. So I'm glad we had you on to talk about this, because I wanted to make my stance, but I didn't know how to quite do it. I didn't know if I wanted to do it on this format or in like an Instagram live, but that's not permanent.
No.
So thank you
Yeah.
for coming on and doing this and
Yeah.
helping me through my little rough patch.
No, this is helping
Yeah.
me through it too. You know, it's been a tough year. Just there's a lot that's happened personally and just within the industry, and it's nice to be able to talk to people about it, kind of air out what we're thinking, and you know, it's extremely important, no matter how big or small our platforms are, to get this information out there and just, you know, flood the market with
Yeah.
information.
Well, what about? There was a question I had. The destruction of his property, $100,000, you know, of his live property was destroyed without it being legal
Hmm.
or their right to destroy. Is he going to, you know, have that a civil suit?
Yes, there is legal action being sought against FWC. Um, there is a GoFundMe that is currently posted by Caitlin Coffey, daughter of Chris Coffey. So I highly encourage people to donate to that. Like I said, I work in the hair industry. The hair space that I work in, we're kind of unique here in Salt Lake, and we're priced to be able to pay our bills, so we don't do tipping. So anytime anyone asks for a tip, in the past it's all been forwarded on to US Arc, but the last
Cool.
few weeks I've been unfortunately sending that GoFundMe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
awesome.
What's
anytime you can get people to donate to US Arc Florida, obviously they have the free membership now. The membership numbers are very important. Obviously they can use all the funding they can get with their legal battles going on with FWC, with the Chris Coffey situation, and the prohibited species and whitelist situations going on there. So I just encourage people, if you can, donate, show your support in numbers, and you know, uh, let's just be supportive of Chris. He's gone through some crazy trauma. I can
yeah.
imagine this is going to affect him his whole life. Who knows if he ever keeps reptiles again? I don't know if I would be feeling up to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
send love Chris's way for sure. He needs all the support we can get.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah. 3 wrap-up questions.
Okay.
Unless you have anything else, Peggy.
No, I
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Just double checking. All right. If you could keep anything, extinct, not extinct, size requirement doesn't matter, money doesn't matter, but you have to keep a colony of it and breed it and produce it. What
Easy.
would you keep?
Yeah, so mine is not extinct. Anyone who knows me in this community knows I'm very picky. I don't buy a lot of animals. I keep what I like to keep and keep it small. The only thing that I'm looking to keep outside of reticulated pythons are Varanus macraei, so blue tree monitors.
Ooh. Yeah.
There's a local serpentarium here that does captive born and bred blue tree monitors, which is very hard to find. So
That's
I feel like
super
I'm
cool.
set up to keep them
Oh,
eventually.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. If you had any advice for anyone new coming in, this can be retic related, this can be just general hobby related, doesn't matter. Just one piece of advice for someone new to keeping reptiles, what would that piece of advice be?
Number one thing is do your research, but beyond do your research, make sure it's an animal that you are just super passionate about. It's hard to always know right off the bat. Like I said, I started with ball pythons. I loved my ball pythons for years, and then when I ran into my mentor Richard Bilbo and got introduced to hands-on with Super Dwarf Reticulated pythons, it was just one of those things. I knew right away that that was the species I was supposed to keep. So, yeah, just be incredibly passionate about what you're keeping.
Mm-hmm.
In the end of the day, these are living animals, and we need to treat them with some respect. So it can't be something that you forget about, or you don't have the passion for, so you just want to get rid of it, kind of a thing. even my ball pythons. I loved them till the day I gave them up, and I made sure that they went to a breeder who was going to, utilize them for what I was going to utilize them for.
Cool.
Nice. So, do you have kids?
I do not.
Okay. Well, there's a show on PBS. It's called The Wild Kratts. The Kratt brothers. From Zaboomafoo in it.
Okay.
If you remember Zaboomafoo.
Yeah.
The guys from Zaboomafoo they got old. They did an animated series. So their thing is creatures have powers, like spiders can climb on walls. And bats can fly or see with sound. What would your creature power be?
Oh, that's a great question.
Isn't it? Thank you, Wild Kratts, for that. I appreciate the great question.
Okay, well, that's tough. I really don't know. I mean,
See, usually the first question stumps the people, and we have this awkward long pause. You had it figured out. So I'm glad we got one with an awkward pause. That's good. We need that.
that one's tough. I really don't know. I mean, flight seems the most freeing for sure. So, I mean, flight could be cool, but
Is there a creature that can jump from one location to the next like a transporter?
Well, if you were human sized and a jumping spider, you could probably jump pretty far.
okay.
So I don't know. I don't even know the answer to my own questions.
Even just a human-sized spider monkey, so you can just be like flying around the trees and stuff.
Right? That would be fun.
Little jungle boy.
It'd be cool to be like a snake, though, like to be able to eat once a month.
Yeah. I like food too much. No, I'm not doing that.
I like food too, but at some point it becomes a hassle. Sometimes, not all the time, but
Cost hassle. The way I have to eat with
well,
my
yeah. If you only had to eat once a month, you'd be saving a
Yeah.
whole hell of a lot of money.
What
That
diet?
sounds
Yeah,
nice.
what diet did my doctor have me on? It's the autoimmune protocol. No nightshades, no seed lectins, so that means no seed nuts and grains, and no gluten and no dairy.
Wow.
So I eat vegetables, fruit, and meat.
Hey, that's great though.
Yeah. So that's why I eat snapper. Dang it, I can eat something.
Oh well, Nate, thank you for coming on our podcast.
Yes.
It's something I do enjoy, so don't think I'm gonna quit, because I'm not. We've made it past the point of most people quitting.
Yep.
We're at 16, so like, it's gonna be here. It might slow down from once a week's hard, man.
It is.
I-
That's how we run our podcast. But
Oh.
honestly, it's great because it keeps the fire under you.
Yeah.
It does. My issue is scheduling at this point in time. I
Just
just
'cause you
I
have a
work 6 days
baby.
a week and then
Yeah,
Ooh.
have
I
the
have a
podcast on
baby.
top of it. So trust me, I get the
Yeah.
whole scheduling thing. But
no.
it's again a passion thing. So
I enjoy
I make
it.
time for my passions.
Yes.
Right. That's where I'm at with this. So don't take what I said at the beginning. If you've made it this far, my
Yeah.
God, if you've made it this far, do not take what I said at the beginning as I'm quitting my podcast and this is the end. Because it's not. Nate, thanks again for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So like I said, I have a clutch that's just about to hatch in the next handful of days. So
Yeah, we'll talk here in a minute.
Yeah. Find me at Katz Reptiles on Instagram. You can find me under Nathan Katz on Facebook. Reach out anywhere. Katz Reptiles on Morph Market, and then of course Lucas and I we run the Retic Lounge. We're almost a year into it, so
Nice.
That is fun.
Very, very proud of just making it this far. The responses we've gotten, and just being able to help people, through their first purchase of a Retic is just super cool. I wish I would have had some of the support that some of these new keepers get.
Cool.
I'm very glad that there's someone some people doing it right in the retic community who people can reach out to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Not everyone's accessible.
No,
Yeah.
that's very true. And one quick tangent. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, Nate, but I don't talk to people about snakes unless I'm going to actually buy a snake from them, or I'm really on the edge of buying a snake from them.
Same, yeah.
So like, and I think this is caused by Owen McIntyre on NPR and my past 10 years of my life listening to him say, "Don't talk to me unless you're buying something. Don't waste my time."
No, I
Which-
want you to talk to me even
which-
if you're curious.
Which, yeah, no, which retic people, like, you need that. Like, that is, it is not venomous snake status, but it is not ball python.
No,
And it is in
you're
between
still
those.
Very much working with an animal that can cause bodily harm.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
there's no dancing around that.
Yeah.
Super dwarf.
I'm
or
too
not.
chicken.
That's okay, Peggy.
I'll just stay with little turtles.
That's okay, Peggy. Oh. Well, we will, yeah. Yeah. Have a good day, night, evening, whenever you're listening. We will catch you all again next week, right here on Herp Talk Radio.
Good night.
Night.